Bias. Inclination or prejudice for or against one person or group, especially in a way considered to be unfair.
The British pundits and commentators were pretty quiet about Max Verstappen the last few years. This all changed during and after the Austrian Grand Prix because they finally had an opportunity to show their ever-present bias again, against non-British world champions. This has always been a pet peeve of mine, and this is the reason why I started making my content in English in the first place, to show things from a different perspective. So follow me into what actually happened in Austria, what was said about it, and my thoughts about it. I'm Wimbo. Here's 3 seconds to leave a like. The event. In Austria, Max Verstappen and Lando Norris came to blows after Red Bull had a rare slow pit stop before starting the last stint. Norris in his McLaren on fresh medium tyres was chasing Max Verstappen on used mediums. Norris, who has had plenty of opportunities to win races this season, was very gung-ho to grab this win, especially after he took the lead in the sprint race a day earlier with a dive bomb, or as the British pundits like to call it when an English driver does it, a block pass. But to his great surprise, Max Verstappen dive-bombed back at the first opportunity, and that saw Norris lose out to his teammate Oscar Piastri as well. So Norris was adamant to not let Verstappen surprise him again. In the first attempt, before turn 3, Verstappen waited till the last moment and took the corner right at the second Norris wanted to make the pass. As Verstappen was ahead, he was the one that could decide to do that. Norris came over the radio complaining about Verstappen moving on the braking and reacting to him. The FIA looked at it and saw no foul from the Dutchman. The next attempt from Norris was a lunge from far away. He locked up and didn't make the corner. He blamed Verstappen for that too, saying that Max was moving again. Now a little wobble from Verstappen was seen perhaps, but nothing like a big move on the braking. By this time, Martin Brundle and David Croft had repeated the phrase moving on the braking so many times that all the sky watchers thought it was exactly that. At the third boiling point, Norris made a block pass again that forced Verstappen off the track, and when he returned to the track, no action was needed from the FIA. Very similar to Abu Dhabi 2021, when Verstappen forced Hamilton off track, the only difference being that Hamilton took the piss and cut the corner, giving him a much bigger lead. The final boiling point was when Norris tried it around the outside and Verstappen was looking into the turn as there was a backmarker there as well, and his car veered slightly to the left and made contact with Norris MCL 38. That minor contact caused them both a puncture, which was just a fluke and unfortunate. I don't think the spikes added to the McLaren cars had anything to do with it. This is what happened, in my opinion, after watching the footage several times. Both are fighting hard, both could have done things differently, the contact was unfortunate, but Verstappen was predominantly to blame. This is not how the British media saw it. They saw it as an opportunity to have a go at Max with no holds barred. But did it work though? After the race. The standpoint of Norris was clear. He was in the car, however, and full of adrenaline. The standpoint of the commentators was clear as well. It was all Verstappen's fault. Then came the after show on F1 TV, a show I really liked with people I met in Zandvoort last year. Jolyon Palmer and Will Buxton went off on one about Max Verstappen, stating he had reverted back to 2021 and more ilk like that. It was sickening because none of them talked about how wild Norris was and how he had a part in it all as well. They went over to the studio to hear from Martin Brundle's son, Alex Brundle, who, to everyone's great surprise, had a similar take on the final situation as myself. He was laughed at by the F1 TV men for that.
Of this, was that the outcome of what happened?
I thought that was pretty disrespectful. Later on Twitter, they assured us they were joking with each other, but the precedent for having another opinion being weird was set. In the following days, many more pundits had their say on the situation. Peter Windsor, Jensen Button and Eddie Jordan were surprisingly positive about Verstappen and also shared the same view as Alex Brundle. The obvious naysayers were, like always, Damon Hill, David Croft, and one of the stewards that day, Johnny Herbert. They were all pushing for harsher penalties to teach Max a lesson. They say it's harsher penalties for all drivers, but in reality, they only mean for Max Verstappen. This whole sentiment was taken over by the partisan F1 groups that hate Max Verstappen and they came out of their caves after hiding there for years. It took Zak Brown, McLaren's CEO, a lot longer to react, but more about that later. All in all, it looks like proper F1 again, with a lot of fighting online and people getting worked up. I don't like fighting, but if I must, I'm ready to go. Here on YouTube, not in real life. Lando and Max. Lando and Max are great friends, and especially Verstappen says that often in interviews. On Thursday of the British Grand Prix event, the media was out in full force to speak with Norris and Verstappen. They both told the media that they had spoken on Monday and spoken things through. Verstappen regretted the way things went and was glad to move on with his friendship intact. Lando Norris was asked by Tom Clarkson about it all and pretty much said the same thing. He told us that some of the things he said were in the heat of the moment and he didn't think Verstappen needed a bigger penalty than the 10 seconds he got. This was fuel for two writers of Autosport to say that they were always looking for a bit of needle between drivers and were disappointed with Norris's view on things.
I mean, as journalists, we're always looking for that little bit of needle between the drivers. And for me, the comments today, the fact that he had rode back a little bit was maybe a little bit disappointing.
It's nice to see journalists being honest for once, but it's pretty disgusting to be disappointed when two drivers stay friends instead of hating each other. It's like they long for a situation like the Civil War at Mercedes or something like that. Now with Norris and Verstappen putting things behind them, you'd think we could move on, right? Wrong. Zak Brown saw this as an opportunity to put his foot in again to disrupt Red Bull more. He questioned the integrity of the team with the radios they sent Max right after the incident. He was pushing for the FIA to be harsher with their penalties and had nothing to say about Norris and his wild attacks. He may have missed the memo that all the drivers who were questioned about Verstappen's driving agreed with Max and Lando that it wasn't all that bad. Lewis Hamilton even sided with Max Verstappen and plainly refused to answer more questions about it, no matter how hard Tom Clarkson pushed for a spicy answer. Big up for Lewis Hamilton. But this shows why the narrative is spun that way by the big F1 media outlets. I understand it, but I don't agree with it. And above all, it's pointless. The problem with bias in F1. The first problem with commentators and pundits being biased is that it's completely unprofessional. We as consumers look at these experts to help our viewing experience and enjoyment. With what we know of those people and their preferences, how can we ever take them seriously when they judge anything? They are calling it over themselves to be questioned all the time, and it also leads to the famous whataboutism, which is rife in F1 as it is. I've read many comments on Twitter with people yelling that the 10-second penalty for Hamilton and Silverstone was way too lenient, and where was the call for harsher penalties then? The second problem is that it causes polarization in a sport with plenty of partisan F1 groups already. I understand that their product thrives on this unrest, but it's the same media that judges a fanbase when they do something they don't like. It's very hypocritical to spur them on to fight and then frown when they're actually fighting. The third problem with the bias they're showing is that they do it with the false hope of changing anything. The FIA has a hard enough time to judge every incident with the rules they have in place now. If they add what those fanboys and girls want, then it will get far worse and it will kill racing altogether. They won't change Max Verstappen and his way of driving. No matter how hard they try to make it seem like dirty driving, the truth is that Max Verstappen was in control of his car at all times and everything he did was coordinated and precise. The only thing he didn't take into account was Norris not taking the curb, and sure, the penalty was on him, but his lead in the championship grew. Max Verstappen needs to lose races first by racing the way he does before he changes anything. Exactly what he did after he was showing off in Monaco in 2018 during FP3, which made him crash and caused him to start on P20 for the race. We saw an entirely different Max Verstappen after that. No matter how much pressure the pundits or the McLaren people put on him, this way of racing works and he'll stick with it. If anything, Norris needs to learn to be more patient and line up his overtakes on Verstappen better, just like Verstappen did in 2019 against the quicker Ferraris. So my call to the biased people is just to pack it in. It has no use, it causes fights and it makes you look silly. What doesn't make you look silly is if you subscribe. Take care now. Doei doei.